Hello, my loves. I'm in complete hibernation mode today because it's rainy. Supposed to do garage. I have yard sales set up in town. It's like our citywide yard sales. So I had that set up for today and it's been downpouring all day. So instead, I am napping before I go meet a friend. So it's been a really nice catch up on sleep day. But I've kind of been in, and this is where my topic for today came up. I wanted to pop in to talk a little bit about solitude and the importance of solitude and how it's often misunderstood too. And it took me so long to really understand the necessity of being alone in several different ways and how it serves you on your own kind of spiritual journey. So I'd spoken a lot in the past, and of course I've done podcast episodes, other videos on my YouTube, so you can go and catch more information on those if you want as well. So I talk about things on there, but I know not everybody listens to those. So one thing I remember talking about shortly after my divorce was the realization, well, I should say shortly after, because it took me about a year after to really be, allow myself to be comfortable being single fully and alone and not be searching for a partner, and also be comfortable and happy when my kids aren't with me. So like truly being able to spend time alone and it not consume me where I'm searching for something to numb myself, where a lot of people end up taking in addictions, drinking weed, cigarettes, going or eating, binge eating, going out all the time, like always constantly trying to fill that void is all a sign that there's something you really need to focus on in that sense of self and being comfortable by yourself. So there's a couple facets of that idea of being comfortable being alone. So in reference to shortly after a breakup, let's talk about that part first. After having a big breakup. So I was married for 10 years. I was with that person for 13 years. So working through a divorce, a breakup of some kind. So many people, myself included, want to go jump and start dating right away or end up with this rebound person. And that's obviously why they're called a rebound, because it usually never lasts. And we don't truly understand the importance of taking time for yourself. And usually there's a lot of pain and grief that we're not dealing with. There's emotional suppression. We don't like being alone because we're kind of in this depressed state. So then you're numbing yourself. You're searching for anybody to help you fill the void, whether that be drinking or just finding any boyfriend or girlfriend or partner to help you feel better and not alone, which are all signs of like codependent actions, addictive type behaviors. And we often don't recognize it in the moment. I know I didn't. Took a while of being with a very not good person at the end, being like, what am I doing? I'm not happy. He's treating me like crap. I'm so off track with my own life. And it's because of the chaos that was created from that partnership. It was such a codependent kind of traumatic situation. And it threw my life off. So being alone is important because after breaking up with somebody, you want to be able to grieve that relationship. And not only the person that you were with, but the life that you had together. And there's so many hard feelings that can come up along in that time, kind of bitter resentments and heartbreak, depending on what end of the breakup you're on. I'm the one who asked for the divorce, but that doesn't make it any less hard for me. I know my ex went through his own little grieving process as well. But like for me, it's like I had this pull of something better, something else out there for me. And I don't necessarily mean a partner, like a better person, because my ex is not a bad person at all. He's a great father, actually. But it's like I knew in my soul that there's something more, but I had no idea what that looked like. So it's like I was getting this kind of intuitive guidance that I couldn't explain at the time. And I still don't always have the words to explain. So my trust in that process was to follow my intuition of getting divorced, moving out on my own, going after these things that I feel in me that I feel passion for. And I'm still working on figuring that out 2.5 years later. I'm not fully in myself or know fully who I am. I know the direction I want to go in birth work and supporting women and in that arena. But it's still hard sometimes to fully grasp who I am and like where my power is and where my strengths are and like where to focus in supporting women. But to be alone is important because we need to be able to bring the focus, our energy back to ourselves and to know how to make decisions for ourselves, not in reference to any other person. Meaning when you're in a partnership with somebody, you're often making decisions like in your life in accordance with them or in like asking their opinion, figuring out if it accommodates them as well. Like you are kind of including them in your life, or at a certain point in a relationship, you're almost including them in your decision making. But I have found an important part of that time alone after a breakup, after a relationship, is bringing the energy back to yourself and truly figuring out what you want for you, not in accordance to anybody else. Because usually a breakup happens because your life is going a different direction. And a lot of things collapse, of course, after a breakup, especially when you have children and a marriage. A lot of things collapse. There's ego deaths that happen. There's so much that you have to look back on in your relationship to learn moving forward. But letting that past life collapse, grieving and letting go of that part of you and allowing a new self to emerge. It's kind of like letting that ego collapse from that life, almost erasing to rebuild this new you that's coming. And that's ultimately what a spiritual awakening is, or like an ego death, or kind of this evolution of who we are when we are letting go of what we used to be, where a lot of times we're realizing now, I know I noticed it in my 30s, when you realize you've been doing so much of your life to accommodate other people, you've been compromising to accommodate others, to be accepted, to be popular, to fit in a group, to fit in a box of society, to seem like a normal person when you're not, to sacrifice everything for your partner or your kids, or your family. Like, you're playing so much of a facade, whether it be people pleasing, any of it. There's such a facade we've played our whole life and kind of been trained into. And when that starts to fall apart, you're like, this isn't who I am at all. So you're trying to figure out, who am I? And you have no idea who you are. And that previous person, that life that you've lived, that kind of ego that was created. It's almost like a false identity that you've been living in. That's dying away. And to fully let that die away is to come into your own solitude and be able to be alone, be able to feel the grief and the pain and the loss of what you were living previously, letting go of that past life. And so many people can't sit in that solitude and that alone time, especially after a breakup, especially after a long marriage where you always have had a partner with you every single night, someone to go to dinner with, someone to go to the movie with. Like, you've always had that partner. So to go from that to not have anybody, especially in like a co-parenting situation like I have, where all of a sudden you don't have a partner and then you don't even have your kids on certain days. I went down into I started drinking a lot more right after I got divorced on the weekends that my kids would be gone, because I'm like, I don't know what to do with myself. What do I do when I don't have kids? And I'd been a stay-at-home mom for years. It'd been so long that I wasn't drinking. I wasn't going out. I didn't do much other than be a mom. So when divorce happened and my kids were at their dad's, I wasn't mom anymore that weekend. So it's like, what do you do with yourself? And it took almost a year, probably more than a year and a half, I bet, for me to really be happy, content, being at home, alone, no partner to fill a void, no going out and dating, no trying to seek something to fill the void of loneliness, no substance that I'm trying to numb myself with. Like right now, I'm alone. My kids left earlier today doing the garage sale, and it's quiet. And when I first moved out on my own, that quiet was terrifying. It's like, I don't know what quiet is. So to be able to sit with that, the solitude, and there really is something to that. I mean, the monks, we see this in yoga and meditation all the time. Just being able to go into kind of this hibernation mode where you separate yourself from other people. And this isn't like an isolation of, I hate people, I don't want to be around anybody, I'm going to just go into my hibernation bubble and drink life away or numb myself out. No, it's a very intentional solitude where you're nurturing yourself. It's not self-deprecating, it's not self-destructive, it is self-nurturing. And there's a big difference, and we have to be able to know the difference. And yes, it can go from one to another. It can begin in kind of this self-deprecation, sadness and depression, and evolve slowly into this awakening journey for you, because that's how it happened for me, I guess. You start to realize that you're numbing out, you're avoiding feelings, you're distracting yourself from what needs to be felt. So that solitude is that time for you to remove the external distractions and just be with yourself. And you're kind of going to experience this ego death happening in this in-between phase of not knowing really who you are and exactly where you're going in life. And I absolutely feel that still. It's been a couple years of kind of going through this process, and I'm now able to sit with it a lot more comfortably and being like, I'm getting by, but I know there's going to be more coming. I just don't necessarily know what it looks like yet. I'm slowly moving along in my own self-evolution, in my own body, of my own self-uncovering. And what it really is that our ego is our identity. You know, the ego isn't a bad thing. It is our self-identity as a human. And it's what separates me from my neighbor. Like we know in spiritual world, we have that understanding that we're all fractals of creation. We're all little fragments of source creation living in this human body. We're all interconnected. However, that ego, that self-identity, is what separates us from everybody else. So that little ego only knows you. It doesn't know in reference to other people. It only knows you and it only acts to protect you. So that is where the ego can become a problem, because it doesn't necessarily have a reference to other people or a consideration of the feelings or the needs of anybody else. It only acts according to your needs and your self-protection, which can be good or bad. And that takes our own learning to understand what behaviors are, where those behaviors come from. If they're healthy boundaries or if they're kind of trauma responses. Like that's our own journey of figuring out how our ego has been created. A lot of the times our ego is really developed mostly in our adolescence into teen years. So the ego sits in the solar plexus. It's the third chakra, right in kind of the stomach diaphragm area. And it develops the most kind of into adolescence and teens, I suppose, early adolescence, is really where that ego is fully developing. So if everything that we're doing in life is based off of what our parents tell us we're supposed to do, or the way our society is telling us that we're supposed to do things, like doing everything to earn a reward or a grade or acceptance into a popular group, or, you know, all of those things that we often have been led to do in like our school systems and a lot of the way society is created now. There's so much that we do as children in order to get approval. And that is where so much of this issue with the way our egos have developed comes from. And now, like my generation is a good example. I'm 37. I'm a millennial, upper millennial. Now, so many people in the 30s, like I see it among so many of my peers, getting into our 30s, mid to late 30s, we're like, what have we been doing our whole lives? Like many of us are dealing with breakups or job changes, or they're moving in different places, trying to figure out where we belong, like who we are underneath this false ego many of us have been playing. And I think that's one of the biggest struggles for a lot of us right now. And so coming back to the idea of being able to be alone after a breakup is so important in order to help recreate that ego and sense of self. And that's because as long as you are attaching yourself to another person, you're not giving yourself the proper space from the expectations or needs or accommodations of another person in order to truly connect with your own self, your own needs, your own passions, your own desires, because oftentimes we're still holding layers above our true essence. There's still so many layers we're still operating on and haven't gotten into the depths of who we are. And it can take a lifetime, sometimes, getting down into the essence of who you are. And as long as we're bringing new partners into our life, we're just filling a void over and over and over. We're just filling that void, and you're not allowing yourself to get to know who you are. So you're not going to find the right partner. And yes, I do think it's important to be alone. to get your own sense of self and your own independence and stability. But I do think partnership is important as well in kind of this union of ourselves, feminine and masculine energies, union of man and woman. Just, yes, I do think relationships are quite important in this life. But if you're putting the value of a relationship before the value of yourself and just realizing who you really are underneath all the layers of falseness, then you're not going to find that soul that really is right for you. You're going to keep just bringing in people who are going to keep trying to teach you your lessons that you're not learning. And that's where we end up with relationship after relationship that feels the same. And we end up jaded because we're like, well, there's no good men out there. It's because you're still dating from a place of woundedness. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It means you're not allowing yourself to be alone. If you're continuing to date the same type of bad men or bad women, depending on who you are, you need to be alone. Period. Stop dating. You need to be alone. And if it feels that hard to be alone, then that's even more of a reason for you to be alone. And it's surprising. Obviously, I still haven't met that one person yet. I'm still single, and I think I probably will be. I joked with a friend recently that I feel like the dental issues I've had recently were almost of my own lesson learning of forcing me to be alone and stop dating in order to have my own kind of self-healing process of caring for myself, caring for the dental work I need to still go through, and my own self-worth and self-awakening before stepping back into the dating world. It's you don't feel good about yourself right now, so you need to be alone, go into hibernation, stop filling the void with people who aren't right for you, because that's going to be the continuing cycle until you really allow yourself that space for deeper healing. And sometimes I think a lot of times we do experience those kind of forced, unconscious, forced solitude experiences where we don't necessarily choose to go into solitude. It's kind of like the universe divinely creating that situation that forces you to be alone for a while or not be able to date for whatever reason and get you into your own private space. I mean, it seems so basic, but it's surprising to me how many people really can't handle nights alone. Being single, not doing any type of dating whatsoever, truly making, and it's not a bad thing. It's because so many of us have been trained to live for other people. Live to the expectations of others, accommodate to others, compromise our life for others. So to actually put yourself first is so uncomfortable, but so necessary. So if you're still kind of in that dating phase, feel like there's nobody out there, or you haven't had that alone time after a breakup, here's your sign to be alone. Choose to take some solitude and find their comfort in solitude. And of course, we can easily swing to the other side of the spectrum and be almost hyper alone, where you don't want anybody. You cancel. I'm never going to date again. I'm never going to get married. I don't believe relationships. I'm so independent and confident alone. I don't need anybody ever. That's just as wounded as the opposite side of the spectrum of somebody who can never be alone. So that's a thing to be aware of as well. And that's all part of the same journey. So I hope everybody has a lovely, what day is it? Thursday? I'm going to go nap a little bit and pick up a friend and her kids from school. So have a lovely Thursday, and I'll check back in maybe tomorrow or Saturday.